The Discovery captain, Sarah Chen, stared at the holographic display in front of her, her coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. After 20 years of exploring the galaxy, she had never seen anything like this. The star map that floated before her showed something impossible, something that made her question everything she knew about space. "Computer, run the scan again," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet bridge of the exploration ship Horizon. "Scan complete, Captain." Results unchanged, the AI responded in its usual calm tone. Sarah's heart pounded. The map showed their current position at the very edge of what they called the known galaxy. Beyond human space, there should have been more stars, more planets, more of everything that made up the endless universe. Instead, there was nothing. Not empty space, actual nothing. A wall of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. "This can't be right," she muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Space doesn't just end." She had been on a routine mapping mission, pushing the boundaries of human exploration further than anyone had gone before. Her small crew of 5 had been excited about the possibility of finding new worlds, maybe even new forms of life. Instead, they had found something that defied every law of physics she knew. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings down here," came the voice of Dr. Marcus Webb, her chief science officer. His usually steady voice carried a note of worry that made Sarah's stomach clench. "On my way," Sarah replied, setting down her coffee and heading for the elevator. As the doors closed behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was descending into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple discovery. The science lab was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Dr. Webb stood hunched over a computer terminal, his graying hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Something he only did when he was deeply troubled. "What have you found?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Webb looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Captain, according to our instruments, that barrier isn't natural. It's artificial. Someone or something built it." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Built it? That's impossible. Do you know how much energy it would take to create a barrier around an entire galaxy?" "That's not the strangest part," Webb continued, pulling up another display. "I've been analyzing the energy signatures and they're not random. There's a pattern. It's like someone wrote a message in the barrier itself." "A message?" Sarah moved closer to the screen. "What does it say?" Webb's hands shook as he typed commands into the computer. "I'm still translating, but from what I can tell, it's a warning. It keeps repeating the same phrase over and over. They must not know. They must not remember. They must stay inside." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. They? Who are they? And what must we not know? Before Webb could answer, the ship's alarm system began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the lab as the AI's voice echoed through the speakers. "Alert! Unknown vessels approaching. Alert! Unknown vessels approaching." Sarah and Webb rushed to the nearest viewport. In the distance, barely visible against the starfield, dark shapes were moving toward them. They were huge, easily 10 times the size of the horizon, and they moved with purpose. "Captain," came the panicked voice of Lieutenant Torres from the bridge. "You need to get up here now. These ships, they're not showing up on any of our databases. They're completely unknown." Sarah sprinted toward the elevator, her mind racing. Unknown ships at the edge of space, just when they had discovered an impossible barrier around their galaxy. This couldn't be a coincidence. As the elevator climbed toward the bridge, Sarah's communication device buzzed with an incoming message. But this wasn't from her crew. The display showed that it was coming from outside the ship, from the approaching vessels. With trembling fingers, she accepted the transmission. The voice that spoke was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was deep and resonant, but there was something wrong with it. It sounded ancient, tired, and filled with a sadness that seemed to stretch across eons. "Human vessel," the voice said, each word carefully pronounced. "You have seen what you should not see. You have discovered what must remain hidden. We are the Guardians, and we have watched over your species for longer than your sun has burned." Sarah's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Guardians? Watching over humanity? How long had they been out there? "We mean no harm," she managed to say into her communicator. "We're just explorers." "We didn't know. You did not know because you were not meant to know," the voice interrupted. "The barrier exists for your protection. Beyond it lies a truth so terrible that it would destroy your species' will to exist. We built this prison not to keep you trapped, but to keep you safe." The elevator doors opened, and Sarah stumbled onto the bridge. Her crew was staring at the view screen, which now showed the alien ships in full detail. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek and organic-looking, like they had been grown rather than built. "Prison?" Sarah whispered, but her voice carried across the silent bridge. "You're calling our galaxy a prison? Look at your histories, human," the Guardian voice continued. "Look at how your people react to truths too large for their minds to grasp. War's madness, despair. The truth beyond the barrier has already destroyed 1,000 species who learned it too soon. We will not allow it to destroy you." Sarah's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe was crumbling around her. They weren't explorers pushing into the unknown. They were prisoners who had just discovered the walls of their cell. "What's out there?" she asked, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "What's so terrible that you've hidden an entire galaxy from it?" There was a long pause before the Guardian answered, and when it did, Sarah could hear something like regret in its ancient voice. "The answer to that question, Captain Chen, is why your species must make a choice. Continue your exploration and learn the truth that has driven civilizations to extinction, or return to your home and live in the safety of ignorance. But know this, once the barrier is crossed, there can be no going back. The knowledge you gain will change humanity forever." Sarah looked around at her crew. Torres was gripping the navigation console so tightly, his knuckles had turned white. Webb had gone completely pale. Engineer Rodriguez was staring at the floor, probably trying to process what they had just learned. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. She was just one person, one explorer who had stumbled upon something impossible. How could she make a choice that would affect all of humanity? But as she stared at the barrier on the view screen, that wall of absolute darkness that had been hiding them from something so terrible that an ancient race had built a prison around their entire galaxy, she knew that the choice had already been made the moment they discovered it. Humanity had always been driven by curiosity. It was what had taken them from caves to the stars. And now, faced with the ultimate mystery, Sarah realized that some truths were too important to ignore, no matter how terrible they might be. The choice Sarah stood frozen on the bridge, her mind spinning with the impossible decision before her. Around her, the crew of the Horizon waited in tense silence, their eyes shifting between the alien ships and their captain. The weight of speaking for all humanity felt like it might crush her. "How long do we have to decide?" she finally asked, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's systems. The Guardian's response came immediately, as if they had been expecting the question. "Time is not a luxury we can afford, Captain Chen. Your presence here has already begun to destabilize the barrier. Other human ships will detect the energy fluctuations within days. Soon your entire species will know that something exists beyond their borders." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "You said you've been watching us. For how long? And why choose to reveal yourselves now?" "We have observed your species since you first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond," the ancient voice replied. "We guided your development, subtly steering you away from technologies that might breach the barrier too early. We hoped you would remain content with your local cluster of stars for centuries more." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You've been manipulating our development?" "Guiding," the Guardian corrected. "Every species that reaches for the stars follows similar paths. Most discover the truth beyond the barrier within their first 1,000 years of space travel. Your species is unusual. You have been more focused on exploring inward, on understanding yourselves and your immediate surroundings. This gave us hope that you might be different." Lieutenant Torres spoke up for the first time, his voice shaky. "Different how?" The pause that followed stretched long enough that Sarah began to wonder if the Guardian would answer at all. "Strong enough to survive the truth," came the eventual response. "But we have been wrong before." The Altarians thought themselves ready. They had mastered their emotions. built a perfect society, eliminated war and suffering from their worlds. When they learned what lay beyond the barrier, their entire civilization collapsed within a single generation. Engineer Rodriguez, who had been quietly monitoring the ship's systems, looked up with wide eyes. What exactly is out there? You keep talking about this terrible truth, but you won't tell us what it is. Because once spoken, it cannot be unheard, the Guardian replied. And once known, it cannot be unknown. Captain Chen, you must understand, we are not your enemies. We are the last survivors of a species that learned the truth too late to save ourselves. Everything we do now is to prevent others from sharing our fate. Sarah's training kicked in, her mind focusing on the tactical situation despite the cosmic implications. How many of you are there? Few. We are the remnants of a vast civilization that once spanned multiple galaxies. We built the barriers not just around your galaxy, but around hundreds of others. Each one contains species like yours, young, curious, full of potential. We protect them all. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying there are hundreds of galaxies, each cut off from the others? Each one thinking they're alone in the universe? It is the only way. The Guardian's voice carried infinite sadness. Isolation brings safety. Connection brings understanding. And understanding brings an end to hope. Dr. Webb moved to another console, his fingers flying over the controls as he analyzed the data streaming in from their sensors. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from their ships. Whatever they're powering up, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. The Guardian seemed to sense their growing alarm. We are not preparing weapons, Dr. Webb. We are charging the systems needed to repair the barrier and erase your memories of this encounter. It is still possible for you to return home with no knowledge of what you have seen here. Your crew would remember this as a routine mapping mission that found nothing of interest. Erase our memories? Torres stood up sharply, anger overtaking his fear. You can't just decide what we're allowed to remember. We have done so countless times before, the Guardian replied without emotion. It is not a decision we make lightly, but it is sometimes necessary for the greater good. Sarah felt something snap inside her. The idea of having her memories stolen, of being sent home like a child who had seen something inappropriate, ignited a fierce anger that burned away her fear. No, she said firmly. Absolutely not. Captain, Webb started to say. No. Sarah's voice rang across the bridge. I don't care how good your intentions are. You don't get to decide what humanity can and can't handle. You don't get to steal our memories and our choices. The Guardian's response was patient, almost gentle. Captain, your anger is understandable, but you are thinking like an individual, not as a guardian of your species. We have seen what the truth does to civilizations. It does not make them stronger or wiser. It destroys them. Then maybe that's their choice to make, Sarah shot back. Maybe the right to know the truth, even if it destroys us, is what makes us who we are. She turned to address her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They were scared, terrified really, but she could see that same stubborn human curiosity that had driven their species from the caves to the stars. We came out here to explore the unknown, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. We knew there were risks. We always knew that someday we might find something that would change everything we thought we knew about the universe. Captain, Dr. Webb said quietly, what if they're right? What if this knowledge really would destroy our species? Sarah looked at him, then at each member of her crew. Then that's humanity's choice to make, not theirs, and not ours. We're 5 people on one ship. We don't have the right to make this decision for our entire species any more than they do. She turned back to the view screen, addressing the Guardian directly. You say you've been watching us for thousands of years. You've seen our wars, our mistakes, our failures. But you've also seen us overcome every obstacle we've faced. You've seen us grow stronger, more united, more determined with every challenge. Yes, the Guardian admitted. Your species has shown remarkable resilience. But this is different. This is not a challenge to be overcome. This is a fundamental truth about the nature of existence itself. Then tell us, Sarah demanded. Stop treating us like children and tell us what's out there. Let us prove that humanity can handle the truth. The silence stretched so long that Sarah began to wonder if the Guardian had ended communication. When the voice returned, it carried a weight of decision that seemed to press against the walls of the ship itself. "Very well, Captain Chen, but understand, once we begin this path, there is no turning back. Not for you, not for your crew, and not for your species. The knowledge we share will spread, as knowledge always does. Within a generation, every human will know what lies beyond the barrier." Sarah's mouth went dry, but her voice remained steady. "We understand. And when your people learn the truth, when they see what we have seen, when they understand why we built these barriers, when they realize that everything they believed about life, about purpose, about the meaning of existence itself, was carefully constructed to hide a reality too terrible to comprehend. Will you still believe that knowledge is worth the price?" The bridge fell silent again. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of decision pressing down on all of them. This was it, the moment that would define not just their mission, but the future of human civilization. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the billions of people living their lives in the safety of ignorance. She thought about the children who dreamed of becoming explorers, who looked up at the stars and imagined the wonders waiting to be discovered. And she thought about what it meant to be human, to always reach for the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. "Yes," she said finally, her voice clear and unwavering. "Whatever the cost, yes, we choose to know." The revelation. The Guardian ships began to move, their massive forms gliding silently through space to form a circle around the horizon. Sarah watched them position themselves with a mixture of awe and terror, knowing that she had just made a decision that would echo through human history. "Captain," Dr. Webb called from his station, his voice tight with concentration. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from all their ships. They're creating some kind of field around us." The view screen flickered, and suddenly Sarah could see beyond the barrier for the first time. What she saw made her legs buckle. Space, infinite star-filled space, stretched out before them. But it was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. The stars weren't points of light scattered randomly across the darkness. They were arranged in patterns, deliberate, geometric patterns that repeated endlessly in all directions. Perfect spirals, impossible mathematical sequences, structures that could only have been created by intelligence. But that wasn't the worst part. Between the artificial constellations, Sarah could see shapes moving. Massive beyond comprehension, so large that entire solar systems looked like specks of dust beside them. They moved with purpose, following routes that connected star system to star system in an endless network of activity. "My God," Torres whispered, his face pressed against the viewport. "How big are those things?" The Guardian's voice filled the bridge, heavy with the weight of eons. "What you see are the architects. They are the true rulers of the universe, the beings who designed and built everything you have ever known." Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. "Designed? Built? You mean every star in your galaxy was placed by them? Every planet was sculpted to their specifications? Every form of life that has ever existed was created according to their grand design?" Dr. Webb staggered backward from his console, his face pale. "That's impossible. Evolution, stellar formation, the natural processes of the universe are illusions," the Guardian interrupted. "Carefully maintained illusions designed to hide the truth. Your scientists study the natural laws because that is what the architects want them to find. The evidence for evolution exists because they placed it there. Your understanding of physics is limited to what they allow you to discover." Sarah felt reality crumbling around her. Everything humanity had learned, every breakthrough in science and understanding, had been fed to them by beings so vast and incomprehensible that they existed on a scale beyond imagination. "Why?" she managed to ask. "Why create us? Why create any of this?" The view screen shifted, zooming in on one of the massive forms moving between the stars. As it came into focus, Sarah realized with growing horror that it wasn't a ship or a creature. It was a building, a structure so vast that it used entire star systems as construction materials. "You are not the first species to ask that question," the Guardian said. We asked it ourselves millions of years ago. The answer is what broke our civilization. On the screen, the impossible structure was clearly visible now. It was a city, or perhaps a factory, built on a scale that defied understanding. Solar systems rotated around it like decorative elements. The light of 1 billion stars illuminated corridors that stretched across light years. The architects do not create for any purpose you would recognize, the Guardian continued. They do not create out of love, or curiosity, or the desire to nurture life. They create because creation itself is their nature, and they create in patterns. Sarah watched in growing terror as the camera perspective pulled back, showing more and more of the structure. It went on forever, a geometric pattern that repeated endlessly across the visible universe. Patterns, she whispered. Your galaxy, every galaxy, is a single element in a vast artistic work. You are not children being protected or experiments being studied. You are decorations in a piece of art so large that your entire existence is less than a single brushstroke. The weight of the revelation crashed down on Sarah like a physical force. Humanity wasn't special. They weren't even significant. They were paint on a canvas, existing only to fulfill an aesthetic vision that they could never comprehend. The architects are aware of you, as an artist might be aware of individual cells in their brush, the Guardian explained. But you have no more meaning to them than those cells have to your artists. When they tire of a particular pattern, they erase it and begin again. Lieutenant Torres had collapsed into his chair, staring at the screen with empty eyes. How many times? He asked in a broken voice. How many civilizations have been erased? We do not know. The patterns change on timescales that dwarf the lifespan of galaxies. What you call the heat death of the universe is simply the architects finishing one artwork and beginning another. Engineer Rodriguez spoke up, her voice barely audible. Then nothing we do matters. Nothing anyone has ever done matters. Now you begin to understand, the Guardian said with infinite sadness. This is why species destroy themselves when they learn the truth. When you realize that your greatest achievements, your deepest loves, your most profound thoughts are all just random noise in someone else's artistic vision, the will to continue existing simply vanishes. Sarah found herself thinking of her daughter again, of all the children on Earth who dreamed of making a difference in the universe. How could she tell them that their dreams were meaningless? How could humanity continue knowing that they were less than decorations to beings whose existence they could barely comprehend? But you survived, she said suddenly, grasping for hope. Your species learned this and survived. Barely, the Guardian replied. And only by becoming what we are now, caretakers of ignorance, builders of barriers, protectors of illusions. We exist now only to spare others the knowledge that destroyed us. Dr. Webb had been silent for several minutes, but now he straightened at his console with renewed purpose. There has to be more. You're showing us the architects, but what about the others? The species that came before us? Where are they? The view screen shifted again, this time showing a different part of the cosmic structure. Here, Sarah could see what looked like vast museums or galleries, spaces, where entire civilizations were preserved like insects in amber. The architects appreciate interesting variations in their patterns, the Guardian explained. Exceptional civilizations, those that create something unexpected or beautiful, are preserved. They become eternal exhibits in the infinite gallery of creation. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized what she was seeing. Those are entire worlds, entire species frozen in time, the lucky ones, the Guardian confirmed. Most patterns are simply erased when the architects grow bored. But occasionally, a civilization creates something that catches their attention. Art, music, philosophy, love. Sometimes these things are deemed worth preserving. The camera moved through the gallery, showing glimpse after glimpse of alien civilizations locked in eternal stasis. Some were clearly at the height of their golden ages, cities of impossible beauty, beings of pure energy engaged in cosmic dances. Entire worlds turned into symphonies of light and sound. This is what happened to your species, Sarah realized, addressing the Guardian directly. You were preserved. Part of us, the Guardian admitted. The rest chose extinction rather than eternal display. We few who remain do so only to maintain the barriers, to give younger species time to live and love and dream before they must face this reality. Sarah stared at the endless gallery of preserved civilizations, her mind racing. Humanity's entire existence had been leading to this moment, the choice between ignorance and despair, between comfortable lies and devastating truth. But as she watched the display of cosmic art, she began to notice something the Guardian hadn't mentioned. Among the preserved civilizations, some were not frozen in stasis. Some were still active, still growing and changing within their eternal galleries. "Wait," she said, pointing at the screen. "Some of them are still alive, still creating." The Guardian's pause was longer this time, and when they spoke, Sarah detected something she hadn't heard before in their voice. Surprise. "You see very clearly, Captain Chen." "Yes, some civilizations have found ways to continue creating even within the galleries. They have accepted their role in the architect's vision and chosen to make it meaningful." Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. "Then there is another choice. Not just ignorance or despair, but acceptance and meaning." "Perhaps," the Guardian said cautiously, "but it requires a fundamental shift in how a species sees itself. Instead of seeing themselves as the center of their own story, they must accept being a small but beautiful part of someone else's story." Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the beginnings of understanding in their eyes. The truth was devastating, but it didn't have to be the end. It could be a beginning. "Show us more," she said firmly. "Show us how they do it. Show us how to find meaning in meaninglessness." The awakening, the Guardian's ships pulsed with energy as they prepared to reveal more of the cosmic truth. Sarah gripped the arms of her captain's chair, her mind still reeling from what she had already learned, but determined to see this through to the end. "Captain," Dr. Webb called out, his voice steadier than it had been since the revelations began. "I'm detecting something else. The energy patterns from the architect structures, they're not random. There's a rhythm to them." The view screen shifted to show a closer view of one of the active civilizations in the cosmic gallery. This one appeared to be a species of beings made entirely of crystalline formations, their bodies refracting light in patterns that created music across the electromagnetic spectrum. "The Zarathi," the Guardian explained. "They learned the truth 3 million years ago. At first, like most species, they fell into despair. Their suicide rates climbed to nearly 90% of their population. But then, something remarkable happened." Sarah watched as the crystalline beings moved through their preserved world, their light songs creating harmonies that resonated across multiple dimensions. Despite being trapped in what was essentially an eternal zoo, they radiated something that could only be described as joy. "What changed?" Torres asked, leaning forward in fascination. They realized that being part of something larger didn't diminish their individual worth. It amplified it. Each note they create adds to the cosmic symphony. Each pattern they make influences the greater work. They may be small parts of the architect's vision, but they are irreplaceable parts. The display showed the Zarathi's cities built from living crystal that grew and changed in response to their music. Even within the constraints of their gallery, they had found ways to create beauty that had never existed before. "But they're still prisoners," Rodriguez pointed out. "Still trapped in someone else's design, are they?" the Guardian asked. "Or have they transcended the need for freedom by finding purpose within constraint? Your human poets write sonnets, 14 lines with rigid rules about rhythm and rhyme. Does the structure make the poem less beautiful, or does it give the beauty a framework within which to flourish?" Sarah found herself thinking about that comparison. Some of humanity's greatest art had come from working within limitations, finding creative ways to express infinite meaning within finite forms. The screen shifted to show another active civilization, beings that looked like living galaxies in miniature, their bodies containing entire ecosystems of smaller life forms. They moved through their space with graceful purpose, tending to the universe gardens they had created. "The Vorthak," the Guardian continued. "They chose a different path. Instead of creating art or music, they became gardeners of life itself. Within their gallery, They nurture millions of species, creating ecosystems of impossible complexity and beauty. Dr. Webb's instruments were recording everything, his scientific mind struggling to categorize what they were seeing. The biodiversity in those spaces is incredible. They've created life forms that couldn't exist under normal physical laws. Because they learned to work with the architects rather than against them, the Guardian explained. When you accept that the universe is artificial, you also accept that its rules can be bent by those who understand the deeper patterns. Sarah watched the Vorthak tending their living worlds and felt a strange sense of peace beginning to grow within her. The initial terror and despair were still there, but something else was emerging, a recognition that even within someone else's design, there was room for genuine creativity and purpose. How many species have found this path? She asked. Fewer than 1 in 1,000, the Guardian admitted. Most choose extinction. Some, like us, choose to become guardians of ignorance. But a precious few find ways to embrace their role and make it meaningful. The view screen now showed a montage of different civilizations within the cosmic gallery. Some had become living artworks themselves, their bodies and cities expressing concepts too complex for human understanding. Others had dedicated themselves to pure research, using their eternal existence to unravel the deepest mysteries of the artificial universe. Still others had become storytellers, creating narratives so compelling that even the architects occasionally paused to observe them. The key, the Guardian explained, is understanding that meaning doesn't come from being the center of everything. It comes from being fully yourself within whatever circumstances you find yourself in. The architects may have created you for their purposes, but they cannot control what you choose to become within that creation. Lieutenant Torres had been quiet for several minutes, but now he spoke up with growing excitement. Captain, don't you see what this means? We're not just random accidents in an uncaring universe. We were created by beings of unimaginable intelligence and power. Every human who has ever lived was designed to be exactly who they are. Sarah felt something shift in her understanding. The despair that had threatened to overwhelm her was transforming into something else. You're right. We're not meaningless. We're purposeful, even if we don't understand the purpose. Dr. Webb looked up from his instruments with wonder in his eyes. And if we can find meaning within the architect's design, if we can create beauty and purpose even as small parts of something larger, then maybe we can do something no other species has done. What do you mean? Rodriguez asked. Webb's voice grew stronger as his thoughts crystallized. Maybe we can influence the architects themselves. If we create something beautiful enough, meaningful enough, maybe we can change the pattern from within. The Guardian's response carried a note of something Sarah had never heard from them before. Hope mixed with fear. No species has ever attempted such a thing. The risk would be enormous. If you failed, if your efforts annoyed the architects rather than impressed them, they might erase not just humanity, but every species in your local cluster. Sarah stood up, feeling a surge of the exploratory spirit that had brought her to the edge of space in the first place. But if we succeeded, then you would become something unprecedented, co-creators rather than mere decorations in the cosmic design. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just talking about humanity's survival anymore. They were talking about evolution, not biological but cosmic. The possibility of rising from the role of passive art objects to active participants in the universe's creation. There would be no going back, the Guardian warned. Once you begin this path, there is no retreat into ignorance. Humanity would have to face the full reality of its situation and choose, as a species, whether to accept the role of cosmic artist or face extinction. Sarah looked at each member of her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They had come to the edge of space seeking new worlds to explore. Instead, they had found a new way of existing in the universe, not as masters of their own destiny, but as conscious participants in something infinitely larger and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. How long do we have to prepare? She asked. The knowledge is already spreading, the Guardian replied. Your ship's communications have been automatically transmitting everything you've learned to Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Within hours, Sarah found herself standing before the largest gathering in human history. The emergency assembly had been set up in what used to be the United Nations building. But the walls had been removed, and the space expanded to accommodate representatives from every nation, every major organization, and every field of human knowledge. The room fell silent as Sarah approached the podium. Behind her, massive screens displayed the images they had captured, the cosmic galleries, the architect structures, the preserved civilizations that had found meaning within their constraints. 3 weeks ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. We believed we were explorers pushing into unknown territory. We thought we were expanding the boundaries of human knowledge and human presence in the universe. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, scientists, leaders, artists, ordinary people who had traveled from around the world to hear this message. We were wrong, but we were also more right than we ever imagined. She gestured to the screens behind her, showing the cosmic structures that dwarfed entire galaxies. We are not alone in the universe. We never have been. Every star you've ever seen, every planet we've ever studied, every law of physics we've discovered, all of it was created by being so vast and ancient that our entire galaxy is just one small element in their artistic vision. The murmur that ran through the crowd was like a wave, carrying fear and wonder in equal measure. I know this is terrifying, Sarah continued. I know it challenges everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. When my crew and I first learned this truth, we felt small and meaningless. We felt like we had discovered that our entire existence was just an accident, a side effect of someone else's grand design. She clicked to control, and the screens now showed the active civilizations in the cosmic galleries. The Zerathi with their light songs, the Vorthak with their living gardens, the countless other species that had found ways to create meaning within their circumstances. But then we learned something else, something that changes everything. We may be part of someone else's vision, but we are not powerless within that vision. We can still choose who we become. We can still create beauty, find love, discover truth, and build something meaningful. Dr. Webb joined her at the podium, carrying a tablet displaying the data they had collected. The civilizations that have survived this knowledge, he explained, are the ones that found ways to embrace their role while making it uniquely their own. They became conscious participants in the cosmic artwork instead of just passive decorations. A voice called out from the crowd, Dr. Maria Santos, one of Earth's leading philosophers. But how can we find meaning if we know we're just part of someone else's design? How can our choices matter if everything is predetermined? Sarah smiled, remembering asking the Guardian the same question. Because even within a design, there's room for improvisation. A jazz musician might be given a melody to play, but what they do with that melody, how they interpret it, what emotions they bring to it, what new variations they create, that's entirely up to them. The screens now showed humanity's response to the revelation, the massive construction projects, the surge in scientific research, the explosion of artistic creation that had swept the globe in just 3 weeks. Look what we've accomplished since learning this truth, Sarah continued. Instead of giving up, we've worked harder than ever before. Instead of retreating into despair, we've reached out to each other and begun building something new. President Harrison stood up from the front row. Captain Chen, what exactly are you proposing? How does humanity move forward from here? Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would shape the future of their species. We become the first civilization to consciously choose our role in the cosmic design. We don't just accept our place in the architect's vision, we make that place so beautiful, so meaningful, so uniquely human that it transforms the entire pattern. The room erupted in discussion as people processed what she was saying. Sarah raised her hand for quiet. The Guardian told us that no species has ever attempted to influence the architects directly. Most choose extinction or preservation. Some, like the Guardians themselves, choose to protect others from the truth. But humanity has always been different. We've always chosen to push boundaries, to explore the impossible, to reach for something greater than ourselves. Engineer Rodriguez stepped forward. We've already begun the process. The construction projects you see around the world aren't random. They're following patterns we detected in the architect structures. We're learning their language, their aesthetic, their methods," Lieutenant Torres added. "And it's not just construction. Musicians are creating symphonies based on cosmic harmonies. Artists are painting with colors that exist only in the galactic core. Writers are telling stories that span millions of years. We're not just living within the architect's vision anymore. We're contributing to it." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she looked at her crew, at the assembled representatives of humanity, at the images of Earth's transformation displayed on the screens. "This is our choice," she said firmly. "We can spend our remaining time as a species mourning our lost illusions, or we can spend it creating something so beautiful, so meaningful, so uniquely human that even the architects will take notice." Dr. Santos stood up again. "And if we fail? If our efforts aren't enough to impress beings that old and powerful?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "Then at least we'll fail as ourselves. At least we'll go out creating rather than cowering. And maybe, just maybe, we'll succeed. Maybe we'll become the first species to transform from artwork into artist." The Guardian's ships were still visible in Earth's sky, waiting to see what humanity would choose. Sarah knew they were watching, along with countless other preserved civilizations throughout the cosmic galleries. "The knowledge is spreading," she continued. "Every human on Earth now knows what we know. There's no going back to ignorance, no return to the comfortable illusions we once lived by. We have to choose as individuals and as a species what we're going to do with this truth." The room fell silent as people contemplated the magnitude of the decision before them. Finally, a child's voice broke the silence. A young girl, no more than 8 years old, had somehow made her way to the front of the crowd. "Will we still be able to dream?" she asked, her voice small but clear in the vast space. Sarah knelt down to the child's level, thinking of her own daughter, thinking of all the children who would grow up knowing the truth about their universe. "Yes," she said gently, "we'll dream bigger dreams than ever before, because now we know that our dreams might become part of something infinite and beautiful. Every song you sing, every picture you draw, every story you tell might become part of the greatest artwork ever created." The child smiled, and somehow that simple expression of hope spread through the crowd like wildfire. Over the following days, the decision was made not through votes or declarations, but through action. Humanity chose to embrace their role as conscious participants in the cosmic design. They began working together on a scale never before achieved, combining science and art, technology and philosophy, individual creativity and collective purpose. The Guardian ships began to depart one by one, but before they left, their ancient voice spoke to Earth one final time. "You have chosen a path that no species before you has attempted. We do not know if you will succeed, but we are honored to have witnessed your choice. The universe will be watching to see what humanity creates." As Sarah stood in her backyard, watching the last Guardian ship disappear into the stars, her daughter ran up to her. "Mommy, are we really part of a giant painting?" Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close, looking up at the stars that she now knew were arranged by ancient artists for purposes beyond human understanding. "Yes, sweetheart, but we're not just paint anymore. We're learning to be painters too." Above them, the stars seemed to pulse with new meaning, and Sarah could swear she heard the faint echo of cosmic music, the sound of humanity adding its voice to the infinite symphony of creation. The galactic map still ended at human space, but now they knew why. They were no longer prisoners of ignorance or victims of circumstance. They were conscious artists in the greatest collaborative work ever attempted, and their story, humanity's story, was just beginning. In the years that followed, as Earth's transformation continued and humanity learned to work within the cosmic design while making it uniquely their own, children would look up at the arranged stars and smile, knowing that they too had a part to play in the infinite artwork of existence. The barrier had not been a prison after all. It had been a cocoon, and now finally it was time for humanity to spread its wings. Your governments and scientists will know what you know. Within days, the general population will learn the truth. Sarah felt a moment of panic. "We haven't agreed to anything yet. You can't just—" "The choice has been made, Captain Chen," The moment you chose knowledge over ignorance, the die was cast. Humanity will now face the same test that has confronted every intelligent species in the universe. The only question is whether they will have guidance in making their choice. The view screen showed Earth now, that small blue world where billions of humans lived their lives unaware that everything was about to change. Sarah thought about her daughter, about the children in schools who were learning about science and history, about the artists and musicians and writers who were creating beauty without knowing they were part of an infinite artistic collaboration. "Then we'd better get home," she said firmly. "Humanity is going to need all the help it can get to make this transition." "Indeed," the Guardian agreed. "And perhaps this time will be different. Perhaps humanity will find a path that no species before has discovered." As the Guardian ships began to position themselves to escort the Horizon home, Sarah felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. They were carrying the most important message in human history, a message that would either destroy their species or transform it into something unprecedented. The journey home would give them time to prepare, to think about how to present this overwhelming truth in a way that might give humanity hope instead of despair. But first, they had to survive the knowledge themselves. The return, the journey back to Earth, took 3 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. Every day brought new revelations as the Guardian ships shared more knowledge, helping Sarah and her crew understand not just what humanity faced, but how they might survive it. The Horizon's communication systems had indeed been broadcasting everything back to Earth, and by the time they reached the outer solar system, the entire planet was in chaos. "Captain," Torres reported from the communication station, his voice grim, "I'm receiving thousands of messages from Earth. Government officials, scientists, religious leaders, news organizations. Everyone wants to know if what we transmitted is real." Sarah looked at the view screen showing Earth growing larger as they approached. Even from this distance, she could see that things had changed. Massive construction projects dotted the surface of the moon, and hundreds of ships filled the space between Earth and Mars. "Dr. Webb, what are your instruments telling you about Earth's activity?" Webb looked up from his console with amazement in his eyes. "Captain, they've built more in the past 3 weeks than in the previous 50 years. Energy output is up by 300%. It's like the entire planet has gone into overdrive." The Guardian's voice filled the bridge one final time before they reached Earth's atmosphere. "Your species is remarkable, Captain Chen. Most civilizations that learn the truth retreat into despair and inactivity. Humanity appears to be doing the opposite." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. That's humanity for you. When faced with an impossible challenge, we don't give up. We work harder. Indeed. But remember, activity without direction can be more dangerous than despair. Your people will need guidance to channel their energy constructively. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Sarah could see the changes everywhere. Cities that had been dark for decades were now blazing with light. Construction sites stretched across entire continents. The oceans were dotted with massive industrial platforms. The landing was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Instead of the usual small crowd of scientists and officials, the spaceport was packed with thousands of people. As the Horizon touched down, she could see faces in the crowd, some excited, some terrified, but all of them desperate for answers. "Captain," came a voice over the communication system. "This is President Harrison. I need you and your crew to report to the emergency assembly immediately. The entire world is waiting to hear from you." Within hours,